Hi there, this is In Pacifica, and I decided to do a commentary track as a little welcome gift and acknowledgement of all the new people on my channel. This video is by far and away the most popular on my channel to date, and I have a lot to say about it. From prep work, to production, to reception, to some extra miscellaneous thoughts I have about the series. I'm working away on an informal follow-up video, but I have absolutely no idea when that will actually come out, so I figured I would break the dry spell and follow up with this, since statistically, most of you will be interested in that. Thanks for subscribing, thanks for clicking onto this video, and enjoy me babbling about Bleach for a couple more hours.
Holy crap.
I am always so stressed starting my video essays because yeah, it's a lot. I know where we're gonna go, but convincing other people to go on this journey with me is always really tricky. But one of my favorite, that's an exaggeration, something I really enjoy about this is that I was able to seed in the idea early on. It's like, hey, Bleach is fun, but it's not a fun time. Like, I tell you right away, like, with that shot back here, here with Ichigo, I literally say, it's like, you're gonna bleed and die to do it. And, guess what? He does. He does in a couple chapters. And, like, if you're familiar with the manga, like, if you're paying attention to this, you're gonna know, like, yeah, this is the first time Okuyoda is holding him up. And Ichigo basically spits in his face and is like, let's go. Yeah, I don't think many people are gonna notice that, if anyone, but I really wanted to seed in the idea early of, like, yeah, things are gonna be rough. Fun music's playing, lots of colors on screen, but get ready.
I love its big dumb battles. I love its unga bunga.
Renji shout out. I love this man. Never get to talk about him in this essay. Genuinely tragedy that he has nothing to do with the last chapters, because that's my man.
Definitively saying you need to be an alpha dog that does it all alone. Sure, it has plenty of flaws. Power creep, excessive fan service, and
I am obsessed with how many people got mad with me saying it has excessive fan service. I just think that's really funny. That's the joke about critiquing fan service, right? But, like, no one questioned the power creep. No one was like, oh yeah, the pacing's perfect for the last couple arcs. They're like, disgusting. How dare you say I can't look at Matsumoto's tits.
Also, I say manga, and I'm sorry if that upsets you.
Holla! Hello! This part. I love all the comments on this part. Yes! Yeah, what up? I say manga. I have strong opinions on the whole manga discourse. Frankly, I don't care if you how you pronounce it. I do care if you're gonna be really crappy about it, especially since, I don't want to get deep into the manga discourse. Yeah, this is what I say. I say manga. Also, shout out to the people who do acknowledge that I say Ukuyoda weird. I'm entirely aware that that's not it. Yeah, I know. I also love how many people, like, gave me pronunciation guides, and they were all different. So, not the universal thing that you might think it is. But yeah, I thought about mentioning it here in this section. I'll be like, yeah, I say Urahara weird, I say Okuyoda weird. But it was just tidier to say, like, hey, I know this, don't at me.
Here's the Spark Notes rundown of 340 chapters of build-up. Bleach is a manga created by Tite Kubo, running from 2001 to 2016.
Gosh, I just love the typography in this video essay. Typography is, it's an art form I really enjoy. I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm anything special at it by any means. And it's really annoying to do in the video edit, just because like it takes a lot of fiddling, because you know, like you have to choose every font, you have to choose every color, you have to shift and affect the size and whatnot, so it takes a lot of time, but it looks so good.
People often mistake him for a delinquent because he gets into fights, but listen, I'm gonna die on this hill. He's not a delinquent. He's a preppy jock that vigilante fistfights bullies and thugs and makes friends with everyone he lays eyes on. Because, as he's
oh my gosh, here it goes! Me getting sad about Ichigo.
That's gonna be important later. Ichigo is voluntold.
Oh man, this page is so brutal. I really appreciate how Kubo doesn't. He makes the violence fun, right? Because that's a major appeal of Bleach, but he never lessens the impact. This bottom corner here with the sword going through Ichigo, like it ripping through his blazer, like that's visceral, like that's suffering. I fully believe this man just felt deep pain because a sword ripped through his organs. I love Ichigo so much. He suffers. He bleeds and dies for those he cares about. I want to protect him.
Hollows are the monsters of this world, corrupted souls that prey on the living and the dead. Although Shinigami can
Ooh, I wish I could have talked more about this whole thing. It tells a lot about Ichigo's inner difficulty and darkness that I don't think really comes out until much later. But he ripped out a guy's tongue. Not unjustly by any means, but Ichigo is ready to get down and dirty and aggressive. And it totally makes sense that when he turns into a monster, it gets a whole lot worse.
Its target audience is early to late teens, which is bonkers when you remember mild
yeah, so this panel's really funny. Because these are all of my squicky moments. These are like the worst moments I could think of that like really upset me, either on the first read or like just looking back and being like, oh gosh, I read this as a young child. I put the Kaien page here in the middle just because the other four were smaller and I could stack them nicely and have a pretty mirroring effect. But it's really upsetting and haunting. That's the point, right? It's a really scary page, but like it's extra worse just having him stare at you, especially with the black background. So I was really pleased with that. Yeah. This is if you don't know about Bleach, this is a rough thing to be presented with. But
fun,
I like it.
Full of cool boy stuff like swords and anime protag hair and blood and titties.
I love that goof.
Discussing incredibly complicated
I love that. I love how it came out.
Loss,
that's so fun.
Sacrifice, betrayal, and the coping mechanisms we use to quite literally battle our inner demons are all major themes. Granted, they aren't always developed to satisfaction.
Some people called me out for this section, for like this comment specifically, because it does have a follow-up beat at the end of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. Oh, punched my mic. That's nice. At the end of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, I mean, as becomes apparent throughout the essay, I don't particularly enjoy the 1,000-Year Blood War. For many reasons, but I don't like it as a conclusion for this point of Orihime being frightened by Ichigo. Okay, alright. Removing my hand because I punched it twice. I don't like that as a follow-up because it takes literally hundreds of chapters to acknowledge this plot point again, and I just don't think it's paced particularly well in the slightest. But also, it's really, really relying on you already knowing about, remembering, and caring about this moment. and having, like, if this moment isn't burned into your brain like it is for me, I don't think it's going to mean as much, even though he does, like, flashback to the hollow Ichigo moments in the Thousand Year Blood War. You know, you're gonna forget, especially if you're reading along week to week. I just don't think it's very good. It doesn't really engage much with Orihime there as well, so, like, she's just not really well used as a narrator. And it's not really a concluding point. It's just her being like, oh, dope. It's all good. I'm not concerned anymore. Yeah, and it's just especially frustrating because she has no reason. There's nothing for her to understand why Ichigo is okay, which I think is, like, really my big beef. That only means something to us because we've read The Blade Is Me, and you know, we have that context. Orihime is just looking at this guy having this echo of some really horrible moments in her life and being like, I don't know why he's fine, but he's fine, I guess. And that's just kind of a shame considering how thoughtful and intentional it is here in the Jugulators and then later on the Dome.
For members of the audience, and some of the more compelling plot lines are dropped in favor of a few simpler, more eye-catching ones.
Fullbring arc.
I'm willing to give it
my
a pass.
Beloved frenemy.
It's opening up conversations and, however subtly, addressing the character's suffering in a way that isn't just petty teen angst. There's a whole extended metaphor about
I do regret how I present this a little bit. No one asked me about this. I'm sad. No one took my bait. I want to talk about the rain. Yeah, I regret how that was presented in the essay, because it's like, oh, hey, there is a character that experiences it. That, like, I wrote that early on in the essay, and, like, before I realized how much I was going to delve into Ichigo's headspace and, like, how messy and difficult an arc it is for him. And yeah, I didn't think to go back and do it. I dithered about it. I don't think anyone cares, but I care. Oh my gosh, the rain means so much. I could wax poetic about the rain for forever, like many Bleach fans, but this page is very, very interesting. Urahara's very, very interesting. He's very complicated. He's very messy. And, you know, the rain means a lot of things. It's Ichigo's depression, most obviously, but also, like, his sense of helplessness. And, like, how those are very interconnected. And there's something just quite beautiful about the simplicity of Ichigo feels deeply helpless yet again, is dying. He's laying here dying, bleeding out. And then Urahara comes and gives him a chance at self-empowerment and self-actualization. And just, but also, like, the kindness of holding the umbrella over him. But also, is it a kindness? Because Urahara's just using him as a tool. But also, Urahara does care about him. It's messy. It's complicated.
Hitting me!
So
good. The
good.
first arc of the story is the usual stock and standard. Ichigo explores the new parameters of his role as a Shinigami, strengthens his powers, and inevitably develops a group of friends that will ride with him through the end of the story. We even dig up a bit about Ichigo's childhood trauma and learn about the death of his mother, Misaki. When he was a child, she was killed by a hollow. When he was a child, he found the first person that he could not protect. It is a triumph.
I love the tonal shift into this section.
He's stronger, steadier on his feet, more prepared.
Once again, like, this essay is all about, like, bringing you down to the emotional level. Being like, hey, it's fun, but, like, I need you to understand there's serious stuff happening here. This music choice, I don't remember what it is. I'll pop it up on screen. I absolutely love it.
That has been helping him this whole time has
Ah,
committed
I love those
horrible
tiny
taboo
animations
by
that I
giving
did.
him
So pleased that
powers
I
allows
thought
him
of
to
that.
keep
Took a lot of
everyone
effort
safe.
isolating the
She will
characters
now be
and
taken back
and
to
fixing the
Soul
backgrounds,
Society
but
for judgment,
chef's kiss.
and ultimately to be
But
executed for her
yeah,
crimes.
I love this music. It's very
Ichigo
slow and
is
somber while also kind of
all
keeping
that
that,
training he has done,
I guess,
all of
cool
that learning,
edge
all
that
of
I
that
associate with
catharsis
Bleach.
he has felt is
That's just tasty.
gone. He can't stop her from being taken away, but he will.
It just
bring
feels
her
right
back.
looking at their faces there. They're
He
so
will
going through so
protect.
much.
Cue the shonen typical battles full of machismo, violence,
But also it's like,
multiple level ups,
yeah, it's
power,
cool.
conviction, and
Machismo,
friendship.
level ups.
It's fun. Occasionally silly,
Yeah,
intense,
I like it.
and
I like it a
fairly
lot. It's a
predictable in
very
format.
versatile
Fight
track.
a dude, learn something integral, move on. Fight a dude, learn something integral,
My sister thinks
move
it
on.
sounds sexy,
Sex
which
programming,
is very funny.
murder
Causes some
subplot,
problems for me later.
conspiracy
But
subplot, Ichigo kinda starting to lose his soul. That's weird. I wonder what that's about. Rukia resigning herself to death in an act of misplaced guilt for the death of her mentor and friend. And, oh yeah, you're watching 15-year-olds fight for their lives against seasoned warriors trying to murder them for attempting to save their friend. Yes, they need therapy, and no, they do not get
I
it.
really enjoyed
But
how
in
many
all
people were like,
seriousness,
"Oh yeah, these
Bleach's
kids are messed
story
up and they
is
need help."
complicated. Beneath all
Look,
the
they have all
loose,
these swords
pure
pointed at them and
glam,
they're
there are
kids.
some
Because I feel
very
like
serious
a lot
questions
of
being asked, and the main characters
I
have
don't
to come
know,
up with answers on the fly, while also
less
in conflict.
less
And that's not just
fun
me stepping
interpretations
back
we'll
and
say
taking mature
are like,
reads.
"Oh,
Like
it's just
Kubo
kids,"
periodically takes you
or
back
"It's
to
just a
basic
story
sense.
about
This
kids. It's a power
situation is
fantasy.
whack,
Don't
and
worry
we
about it." It's
just
like,
have
I'm
to
worrying
do our
about it.
best to deal with it.
Ishida's looking at the
The
picture of his
subsequent Hueco Mundo arc shows
decapitated
everything we
grandfather.
learned from the
Like,
Soul
I'm
Society.
having a bad
It's
time because
irony
Kubo
and
wanted me to.
love. While the Soul
And I really
Society
appreciate
arc
how many
took place over
people
the course of a few
were
days at best,
there
our
with
main
me on that
characters
level
have
and being like,
matured
"Yeah, this is a
substantially,
serious story,"
which is
instead of just kind of
what happens when you make child soldiers.
shaking
And
it
yes,
off.
I will be hanging a lantern on the fact that that is literally what's happening in Bleach, but we don't have time to deal with it. Either way, they have learned
Just-
more about the cost
I
of
love those
sacrifice,
kinds of
their own
goofs.
personal limits, the things
Like,
they
just
will
you
do
can just
for their
feel me
friends,
falling down
and
the rabbit hole of
horrors
like,
that
"Hey, I need to
reside
say
in
this
the world
tangent and then
of
come
the
back."
dead. It is this
I love being able to
understanding
reflect that
into
in the
Arracar,
animations,
which allows all of those themes and ideas
as well as
to be cranked up to
the text and
11.
performance.
While the Soul Society arc was focused on adjusting to the big leagues and finding
This
inner
volume,
strength in times of
this
adversity,
volume 10,
Arracar
it's one of
distills
the
the
earliest
themes of
volumes of
inner
manga
strength
I
into
ever
one of
got
inner
as a
balance.
kid.
It has been made clear to us so far that everything
Yeah,
is both
it's so
pure
old
and
that you can
profane
see
within
the
them,
old
be they
Jump
human,
logo on it.
Shinigami, or hollow. The only way to succeed
And
is
it's
by
also like,
conquering one
I mean, you
over
see me
the
flip
other.
through every volume of Bleach that I have here.
Visards and Arracar.
Okay, we're gonna pause and come back to this. You see me flip through every volume of Bleach that I have. And I wish I had more from the Soul Society arc so I could use that as B-roll whenever I'm talking about pre-Hueco Mundo stuff. But I love that thing. I've read it so many times. It's just so good. I have such an emotional bond to the Shibas just because, I'm flipping through all this stuff. Just a great little chunk of story there. Oh, it's just so good. Soul Society arc, so good. Hot dang. Typography, we're talking about it again. I love these section headers. They look so good. I'm so pleased with how they came out. I didn't talk about the first one. Wait, what is Bleach again? But that one was where I was like, oh, okay, right. I can play with the space. I don't have to do text the traditional way. And that one, I think it's not my favorite of all the ones in this video. I think it's very good. It sets a tone, but it's not as smooth. This one though, I adore this one. I was so pleased because I was fiddling around with some of the different settings and seeing if I could, change the orientation of it. And I love the mirroring effect. Arracar is a little difficult to read for sure. But I took that gamble because I'm saying it out loud. But also having the V mirror the A and showing hey, these are you know, two sides of the same coin. I'm so pleased. Oh, it looks so good. It's so smooth. This whole section. I love the Visards. I love the Arracar. They're two of my favorite groups in the entire
Bleach
series.
Talks a lot about balance.
But like this is where we start cooking with gas. See, like just me playing with the shades of things, the oh, this man's done crimes. Like moving, like the animation of the text itself. I think it's great.
Shinigami are obviously,
yeah, and like you can see a lot of the balancing stuff that I'm mirroring here. You know, just really tiny stuff. It's really kind of obvious on the nose, but I hope that it's tiny enough that
horrible people into positions
you don't have to worry. Yeah, it's not like, oh, okay, being dumb and cheesy. I honestly thought I was gonna get more pushback about, like, hey, the Shinigami aren't, like, good. Like, the Shinigami have a lot of baggage, and just the fact that these two monsters are allowed to hold positions of power says a lot about the Shinigami's values. And, like, we'll get into it more, but, like, I take pretty hard swings at the Gotei 13 that went unchallenged, which I find very interesting. I have a lot of complicated critical feelings about them and how they use Ichigo and whatnot. But it was just kind of funny, especially since, like, one of my real life friends, he was like, "Oh, what's Kenny done wrong?" It's like, what do you mean, what's Kenny done wrong? Don't call him Kenny. You're not friends. This guy wanted to cut up a 15-year-old just because he thought it'd be fun. Like, don't do that.
Power, the functions and goals of Shinigami are good.
Yeah, that's an interesting tension in Bleach itself.
Suffering and death because of their insatiable hunger. They are there, at least ostensibly.
Yeah, the Shinigami are doing a good thing, and especially here in the early chapters before they get complicated with, like, internal politics.
Granted, some moments remind
but
us that hollows are merely
yeah, it's something I wish Bleach honestly would deal with more. It certainly raises the question, but it doesn't really talk about, like, how do we fix the fact that we have, you know, a mad scientist turning people into living grenades.
They are hunger. They are in pain. These are human souls that have decayed into a monstrous state, and everything here is equal. Cosmically, the world is balanced. And then we meet the Visards.
Oh.
The idea of Visards is
so good.
Pretty early on.
I just love Shinji, especially in all of his early moments. Such an interesting, ominous force. And, like, you really get a sense that, like, he is rogue. Like, he doesn't belong on one side or the other, and he's really complicating Ichigo's worldview.
So, our resident ominous vendor that knows a bit too much offers Ichigo a little boost. And it's fine. This is just part of the training. Don't worry about it. I'm sure it'll be fine. Listen to me. It will not be fine.
I love that goof. Anytime that I can do something interesting with my narration, I'm pleased. You're like, holy crap, what is this? It would be perfectly acceptable if I just read it straight. But I like the performance art of it. I think that's really interesting, and I'm always pushing myself to, like, read more into it. Some people criticized the narration, like, oh, you went too far, but it's like, no. No, this is accurately conveying how I feel. And also, you know, it's trying to reflect the state these other people are in, like the characters, and manifest that. It's like, hey, they are going through it.
They are still regarded as criminals. To those ruling the Soul Society, a taboo is a taboo, and these people require punishment. They are now the villains.
Yeah, like you, like even in parts like this where I'm not really framing myself. ugh, this panel, terrible. When I'm not really speaking for any of the Visards, you know. I was very careful to sound like very somber and careful and just like also reflect like this is tragedy. It's like, hey, like these are the words of the Gote 13 and they are wrong. I just love what a melancholic section this is.
What has occurred. It's pragmatic in its cold-bloodedness. If they survive the incredibly dangerous process of
brutal panel. I think about this all the time.
Visards come out the other side faster, stronger, and more durable than a normal Sharingan.
Like, the Visards are such survivors. They have the rawest deal of most people in Bleach.
With their hollow selves. If they slip up even for a moment, if they become even the least bit overwhelmed, well, as Ichigo's hollow self proclaims, if Ichigo's control slips just a little bit, he'll kill Ichigo and wrest control. Should this ability fall into the wrong hands, yes, it can make impossibly strong, impossibly dangerous enemies that could turn into uncontrollable rage monsters at any time. If you are a xenophobic, culturally elitist, militaristic governing force,
see, like I'm throwing some harsh terms out. And I'm pleased no one pushed back on it. You know, manga and anime fans can have a reputation of being apologists for whatever the manga says. You know, don't make it political. But you know, it feels very self-evident when they're condemning innocent people to death, like they're victims, and they're like, "But you complicate our worldview. We want you dead. We want to mobilize. We're drafting this 15-year-old who's convenient to us for the second, and making him part of our military force instead of." Trying, like, they have no right, you know, like they just have no right to commandeer people the way they do, but they do it because they're in power and they can. Yamamoto, oh man, the crimes this man did, I don't get into it, but Yamamoto can get his. But yeah, I'm really pleased that the disagreements that I had, or that people had, weren't about, I guess, the important stuff, you know? Like, no one's out here being like, you're whining too much. Rub some dirt in it. Ichigo can take it. And that's just kind of nice. It's just kind of nice with the rancid reputation that anime fans can have sometimes.
Brash enough,
there's hope.
Arguably disposable enough to deal with it. But Ichigo doesn't really care about all of that. He's just concerned about saving his friends and how he's gonna handle the schoolyard rumble he's about to go through. And yeah, this is the thing that allows him the exponential growth to survive that. It also nearly consumes his soul and turns him into a barbaric, savage monster in the process. It isn't really addressed much after the fact because Ichigo is an incredibly resilient dude and deeply emotionally repressed, and he seems to have it more or less under control, and really we have bigger, more pressing narrative matters to deal with. But that doesn't change the fact. Calling this a traumatic experience is a bit of an
I'm just like grunting now. I love the imagery of like them vomiting up their masks.
And now he has to look his
it's just so painful.
It scares him. It haunts him, and it nearly consumes him.
This is going good. But I love all the mouth imagery that Kubo uses. Sometimes it's really bad, real upsetting. But I mean, it does so much, right? Like, with hollows, it's consumption, it's hunger, it's eating things. But also, you know, like, when you're hollowifying and you're spitting up your mask, like, you can't breathe. You're choking. You feel like you're dying, even though you're dead. And, you know, it's also, like, very evocative. Like, it spreads out from the center and wraps around your entire form. Oh, it's so good. It's especially fitting with Ichigo here, Shirasaki, rather. I prefer to call him Ichigo, portmanteau of Hollow Ichigo, but it can be difficult to understand through audio, whether I'm talking about the Hollow or just Ichigo. So forgive me if I slip up. But yeah, Shirasaki, it's also just really nice having all of that mouth imagery for him as well. And like, you know, I'll be swallowed up. Again, it's like, it's the consumption. Like, Ichigo only understands these beings as beings of hunger and violence. And, you know, like, it's coming from the inside. I don't know if that's all intentional, but it's incredibly effective.
Ichigo literally has to battle
more parallels, more balance,
and the longer
more
it
mirroring.
Takes, the less conviction he shows, the more ground he loses, the less of a grip he has.
Oh, this page! This page is a beast. It's so good. I love when Kubo plays with form and like the depiction of the pages. Like, just it contributes to the story so much and how Ichigo feels, and how, like, one, the eye is really, really aggressive and jarring, and it's off-putting and frightening, but also, like, the fact that it's, like, ripping out of Ichigo's face into the panel, and he's used, like, the really thick, heavy ink brush to paint it to show it's more aggressive instead of, like, his normal clean lines from a dip pen. And, like, it pulls at his, what's the term? Shihakusho? You know, it's great. Like, it's just tearing at the edges of Ichigo, slowly spreading across him. Like, it's so stressful reading this and, like, going through this very visceral experience and then just getting Yami's face and he's like, oh, let's go. You know, even, like, Yami doesn't even understand that, like, hey, there's a good chance that Ichigo could still absolutely destroy you. Like, if Ichigo comes out, like, oof, dicey. Or at least, if not beat you, make it very, very costly to succeed. I love when Bleach plays with the horror.
I hate to tell you this, friends, but he almost does. It's often framed as though Ichigo
I love when Bleach gets messy and scary.
Like he's just this dummy that can't resist hitting the turn into a I
would beat blood if Kubo actually made a horror series, because I contractually would have to read it and it would destroy me. Because like, he's got a good nose for horror. And he just sprinkles it in. I don't talk about it much in this essay at all, but oh yeah, the best worst moments are when it gets scary.
Not that he's too soft or that he's too weak or whatever dumb machismo BS you want to try and call it, but maybe Ichigo doesn't want to have to violently defeat, or worse, kill his enemies with this great and fearsome power he's unlocked.
This is a really interesting comparison, or I guess arc, for Ichigo to go on, because pre the dome, you know, Ichigo's so set on, like, I'm not gonna kill my enemy, like, why would I? That doesn't make sense. But, you know, after that, he's willing to play in the space. Like, he's not as squeamish about it. And it's really sad. It's really sad, because I don't know if the enemies are necessarily getting worse, and, like, you've gotta put them down. But he's definitely hardened in a way that, you know, this Ichigo here, he never would have considered it, you know, in the Fullbring arc. He's the one to suggest killing Tsukishima to free his friends. You know, he's the one who, like, he's ready, like, he's knife eyes by the time Ginjo has his reveal.
It should not be difficult to take up arms against this dark.
They don't really talk about it at all, ever. But it's a very interesting, sad
feels more personal,
arc that he goes
more painful,
on.
More frightening than everything that has come before.
I would have liked Shirasaki to weigh in on that and be like, hey champ, you've got the killer instinct.
For as compelling as the tragedy
you're
of the
using it
Visards
whenever you
is,
need to,
that is not all.
but alas.
Balance is integral to the world of Bleach, and so we must have an opposing force rise to meet
I was
them.
so pleased when
And
I
they
made
do,
this.
in the form of Arracar. Arracar are hollows that
I love it.
masks,
Again,
not only a human
wonderful
form,
mirroring.
but the ability to
Also, funny about this color spread, it has all the Espada except for Eriniro. I just think that's funny. I just think it's funny. Screw that guy, right? How dare you take Kain's face?
faster, stronger, more durable.
Especially
They are
since,
the
like,
utter opposite
you know,
of
you've got
Visards.
Stark
Hollows that
and
have been
whatnot.
given
It's
a
like,
touch
you're
of
not
the
really
divine
making a
since
show of it
Shinigami
yet.
have been tainted by the depraved. While Visards are seen as abominations, chased out of society and left to fend for themselves, Arracar are regarded as evolutions, improvements on the hungering beasts we've seen so far. They are the elite, the rulers of Hollows. Hueco Mundo, the land of the Hollows, is a... Okay, I know this is that's a bit much even for me.
I love this whole
No,
bit.
stop. I also use a semicolon. Duh. Hueco Mundo, the land of the Hollows,
I don't know.
is
I don't
a
know what it is about
Anyone strong
self-deprecating
enough
humor
to
about
take power
pretension.
is
It
in
just tickles
power,
me.
and very conveniently,
You know, I
determines
say a lot of
who
crap
can
in
have
this,
that status
right?
on
Like,
their skin.
I'm throwing around
These
a
are the
lot of
aspired.
things. You know, xenophobic, cratocracy. Just really getting into the weeds of it. But it was important to me to just be like, hey, I don't take myself too seriously. You know, it's like, we're goofing, we're having a good time. Everything, I want everything that I say to come off as well considered, not, I guess, egocentric. That's not the right word. I'm aware that I'm talking about the big dumb sword manga, you know?
Feared and feared by all
I'm
other
not taking it
Hollows.
too seriously.
This system is admittedly complicated by the bad guy coming in and doing just a teensy bit of colonialism, but the result is
This
much
also
the
made
same.
people mad.
The
How dare I
Espada
say
are
that
the
Aizen
God Kings
colonized a
rule
power
over the
that he
vast desert of
invaded,
the dead and dole out
subjected,
their crooked justice
completely
to the
destroyed their
We aren't shown the
pre-existing
exact
status
process by which Arracar
or
removes the
social
dead.
system
We catch
of
glimpses,
instituted
course,
himself at the
possibly
top
because it's
of,
about as
completely
complicated as
reformed and
Crocodile's
made
scab,
completely
but from the
dependent
little
on
that we've
dependent
been
on what
seeing,
he did,
these
only
aren't
to
ignorant
toss into the
victims
wolves when they were
forced into
inconvenient to him.
transformation. These are people that
Crazy how I
deliberately
think
choose
that's
to remain
colonialism
oppressed.
when that's
It's
colonialism.
definitely a stretch to say they have support when they take on this endeavor, considering
But in all seriousness,
there's
I think
something
Hollow Society is very
validating about people who
interesting.
know watching you undergo this transformation.
I
Maybe their
like the
weakness
sort
is
of
betrayal,
perverse
but they will also
intimacy
acknowledge your accomplishments.
that Kubo
Far cry from
explores.
transforming scared and confused
You know, I
individuals
nod
into
to
some
it, but I
choking
love that
mess.
sort of friction between, you know, wanting to rip each other apart, but also, like, I still respect you, I still see you. The Espada, super complicated in their social dynamics, not least of which because Aizen is artificially holding them together. And, you know, like, you can feel that they shouldn't all be here together. That's not how they're supposed to exist. Like, there's no reason for Neutra and Grimjow to be in the same building as each other and not be going at it. But at the same time, like, they'll talk infinite smack, but they still kind of see each other as like, they respect each other's power, even if they won't say it. It's like, I understand what you are and what you do, and that's just it's an interesting, complicated dynamic. You see it a lot with Grimjow and Okuyora, of, like, you know, just that sort of weird intersection of hating each other, but also, like, having to work with each other and having to rely on each other. Whereas Visards are about community, and they're, again, the inverse. You know, they have to stick together because they are bonded by trauma, because they know they're stronger together, not because they're being forced together by some outside force.
While the Arracar show nothing but contempt for the Shinigami, they are similar down to their spiritual anatomy. They contain the same pressure points, the same fragmentation of their souls into Zanpakuto, even the same method of releasing their abilities into first one and then 2 forms.
Yeah,
Visards
I
and
like
Arracar are
baiting
fundamentally opposite.
Okuyoda's second
They're still
form.
inherently similar.
There are a lot of things in this
They
essay where
come
it's
into
like, hey, if you
existence
know,
because they took
it's
elements
coming.
of the other side
Get hype.
and brought them into harmony.
I'm not gonna show you
Too
too
far into any
soon.
one direction, and they will fall out of sync and become non-functional. The one exception, of course, is Ichigo. Ichigo doesn't really have harmony. I mean, sure, he does it in the end. Manages to bridle
hitch.
the darkness running around in his soul.
Uh,
That is something accomplished sheerly
Editing
through brute
this
force.
video essay was
After
really
all,
interesting,
there is a big difference between
because
wrestling
it
the
requires a
demons
lot of like
around
really
and
subtle
actually putting them to rest
changes
so they no longer try to kill you.
in development.
And it's telling, I think, that Ichigo
Oh
admits
man,
that he's
struggling to speak and listen and watch at the same time. Yeah, editing some of these panels very laborious. Because again, like I'm having to crop and pan, every side. You know, you can't just like shrink or crop without it completely destroying things. Like you might in like an image editor. At least not with the program I'm using, or not in a way I know. But getting those hitches, I mean, you see them in a couple places. I hope people just assume that it's YouTube or their phone being weird. But because the movements are so tiny, my graphics card just wasn't good enough to show me that. Like, oh man. Making the video can be very, very difficult because, you know, I had a lot of lag issues when editing and like trying to play things back. And so like the only way I would get the clear video was to completely finish it, render it, watch it, take notes of where things goof. And like that's why some of the transitions, like when things come onto the page, it takes like it's so fast. It's kind of disorienting. It's because I'm trying to guess, like, okay, is this long enough? Is this long enough? It's lagging. I'm trying very hard to see, you know, to guess where it comes through. And even clearly with the method of taking notes and expanding it out, it's still too quick. Too quick. But
the space where his Zanpakuto and
I think mostly it turned out good.
Is inaccessible through the normal means of meditation. He cannot go there of his own volition. Cannot begin the work to
grow the crimes of Ichigo's education. It makes sense why he's taught the way he is.
It works
but it's frustrating that in times of peace, Urahara never offered. Like it also doesn't make sense for the pacing of the series. Like why, when Ichigo's messing with this deep depression, why would Urahara be like, hey, here's Jinzen?
What if things fall out of balance because I don't know how to do things without violence?
But, you know, it leads to this very interesting narrative issue.
Everybody kisses and makes up after the Soul Society
arc. Because Ichigo had to trauma learn everything, he grew too fast, and it's leaving him open to these very big issues.
The gang, being good Nakama, decide they need to go into the land of the Hollows to get her back. Hueco Mundo,
love this page.
The land of the monstrous.
Love how this shot turned out.
I'm skipping a lot, like a lot, but this is when the Arracar arc really starts to step things up. The beauty and nuance of the world is coming more into focus.
You probably noticed that I use
more aware that
my use of Arracar arc and Hueco Mundo arc is inconsistent. I think of them as different for the most. Like Arracar is everything post Soul Society up through them going to Hueco Mundo, and Hueco Mundo is that through really into like Ukuyoda's death. Just because I think I feel like they're dealing with different things. They're focusing on different things.
We start to see more of Arracar society.
They also just are in different locations, so you know maybe that's part of it. It's like, oh yeah, the sky's black. It's Hueco Mundo.
Between the Arracar, they are monsters, but they are also people. There's a surprising bit of nuance amongst the Espada and their followers.
What? Noisha, vomit.
relationships they protect.
This dude sucks. He super sucks. But he's a great character, and I love the function he serves in the Espada. Gosh, the conversations the Espada have are some of the most interesting things.
Fight and die.
Because, like I said, like it's showing their different philosophies and whatnot.
Very tedious.
Shut up, Zamari, you dumb pumpkin.
Oh, Zamari, rest in power. You could have been something, but you know, it's very clear that like Grimjow's a different creature to Neutra. You know, it's very clear that like Halibel is different from Zamari. And the things they believe and the things they're challenging each other on. And I really enjoy that. He didn't need to give us the bad guy check-ins like that. The story's so much better for it.
Defined by their lack. Many of them have said they want better. They want trust and companionship.
Stark. A bit of a nothing burger of a character for all of this arc. But just that shot of him looking blandly into the camera with my narration, it's really sad.
Hungry Hollows thing makes it a literal dog-eat-dog.
That's a fun surprise. That wasn't intentional, the dog-eat-dog thing. That wasn't me referencing the chapter. Me going, oh hey, was me going, oh hey, and be like, oh cool. That connection actually happened. That's cool.
He's the strongest. I don't talk about him a lot, but I want to hit him with sticks. I hate that guy.
Yeah, get stuffed.
Some of them just want to be left in peace. Some of them want connection. Some of them want friends. But this arc isn't solely about them. Our heroes are still here.
Ugh, this whole part.
Adversaries blocking the path.
So let me cry about this the friendship. Friends.
They must battle their own fear.
I like the weird team-ups that happen in this arc. Renji and Ishida, especially, I think they have a really interesting dynamic, and it's a beautiful bit of growth, considering their meeting, and Renji, you know, taking shots at Ishida. But I think it's really interesting how you can feel that sense of isolation. And it feels quite different from the Soul Society arc, because like they know the cost, and like they're being asked a lot more difficult questions, whereas before, like the Shinigami, like they're just having to fight through the Shinigami to get to Rukia, and the Shinigami are unequivocally presented as monsters. Like the captains are terrifying when they're first introduced. But here the gang feels a lot more wary and concerned. Like the Howls have a reputation, and it's gonna be real bad when they start throwing down with them, which it is. And it's really sad to think back to like the last time they see each other and they wish each other well, and you know, and then they run off to what might be their moral corruption or their deaths.
Butchering a literal palace worth of enemies, some of whom don't even want to fight you. Sometimes the answer is easy. You know what you have to do the moment the question is asked. Sometimes you're less certain and you don't have time to think about it until later. And sometimes you don't really have a choice at all.
What is it? Beat 3 of, uh-oh, things are going wrong.
All of that brings us, finally, to the Lust chapters. It is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the entire story. This is the last battle of import within Hueco Mundo. Arguably the last battle of import for a long time. Ichigo is so close. He has everything within his grasp.
Okuhara looks so good in this spread. That my guy got pretty. He got a glow up. Kumo gave him that delicate mouth, and he was like, "Yes, sir, let's go." He looked rough the first few chapters that he was in. But Kubo really zeroed in, like, look, the eyes are everything. And And I just love how, like, he is surprised by Ichigo showing up. Be like, oh crap, this guy just, like, punched through the floor. This heckin' guy. And then just, like, him looking over his shoulder. Such a good summation of the difference between the two. Just like, alright, the scene check mark versus, Ichigo sending a FU strongly worded letter to follow.
Arc's primary antagonist, Okuyoda. Just one more obstacle. How bad can it be? The princess, the hero.
Oh, I love this section. Editing the video itself, putting this together, I was despairing. It took so long. But I love the look of it. Each section has its own visual language. Not anything super obvious, but like the color combinations, the font combinations, how some of the things move across the screen. Each section is, I try to make it quite unique in how that works. And I love how this part turned out. We'll see in a moment here when I start talking about Ichigo specifically. But oh, it just feels so good.
Inevitable, no matter how badly you wish that weren't the case. First up, we have my girl.
Oh, excuse me, Orihime goes first. I know how my essay works. I will fight to the death. I love the sort of crisscross. Yes, I think that's so interesting. Like, it's so tiny, but I think it's lovely.
Hasn't been kind to Orihime. She's a ditzy,
I love how many people argued with me about how Orihime, they didn't dislike her because she was a girl and they hated girls. It was because she said, Kurosaki-kun! Yeah, and that's all she did. And she's a no good character, even though I spent like 15 minutes showing that's demonstrably untrue. Like, I take back what I said. I take back what I said. No more compliments for anime manga fans. Yeah, I mean, like, what more is there to say? I spent 15 minutes ardently defending her and, like, her importance and the things she does and the arc she goes on, and it's like, well, actually, that's not why I hate her. I hate her because she does nothing in these fights, and she's totally useless in Dead Space. And what good is a character if they're not combat-oriented?
Or to write her off as deadweight because she lacks the aggression of all the other battle wife girl bosses on screen is a gross mistake. Orihime, despite her goofy personality, is an incredibly proactive character that makes bold choices.
Yes! Curious how no one talks about... Well, I mean, of course they wouldn't. You know, Orihime's entire arc is about soft power, especially in Hueco Mundo, and it's about resilience. You know, like, I find it interesting that no one talks about how Okuyoda is trying to break her. Very explicitly, he is trying to destroy her will, and make her docile, but also, like, challenge her worldview. And, like, no one talks about how she was fists up. She was ready to throw down with her bare hands. No powers. He could snap her in half.
I love that she fights against the bitterness and the cynicism and the pain in her world by continuing to be light and
so analytics... actually say, like, this section is one of the most viewed in my video. There's a fun little spike here as people go back and actually read all of the pages, which is gratifying. It took a lot of time to sort through them and then fit it on the page. But yeah, my girl goes through it. Everyone goes through it, but, like, she deals with some real heinous stuff. And I like the visual language of the red and yellow tinted pages and panels. Those are, you know, meant to evoke discomfort and sadness and fear and horror in you. It's like, that's the oh no page, right? And then just having it cleansed, as it were, by the black and white pages. I just really like that. I think it's neat.
She made 13-year-old me notice that we idolize a whole lot of warriors in a world that could stand for a whole lot of healing. But for all of Orihime's strengths,
I love that I came up with the idea of having the isolated characters. I think that lends such an interesting character to this section. And that's purely just because Kubo gave that beautiful panel of her just standing there, and it's completely isolated. It's really easy to cut out. So that then sent me on a quest to find one for all of the characters, which, Ishida was difficult. It was a nightmare getting one for Ishida. I don't love the one I chose, but like it gets the job done.
She can no longer hold her own, and the benefit she offers by defending or healing other people starts to be outmatched by the vulnerability she poses. People start having to take her side.
Again, like I love it. I think it's so effective having just her there, seemingly staring at all of the difficulty that she's facing, just because, you know, Kubo drew her facing away from us.
To become stronger, to become worthy of being a main character in a battle manga, but when compared to people who have been shot out of an XP canon, no. Incremental steps won't really cut it. So, Orihime fights the one way she...
One thing that I've really had to learn in my video editing is not needing to clutter up the page with something all the time. Like, there doesn't always need to be an animation or a picture or text. You know, if you're saying something profound, you can just let the audience sit there and percolate on it. You know, especially since there's not an inconsiderable chunk of people who are, you know, just listening to this as a podcast or you know, just a narration. You know, like I'm always anxious, like, oh, I gotta keep their attention. I gotta, you know, I've gotta check the box of having things on there. But yeah, just being able to trust the narration, and let that do the heavy lifting. It's always an interesting lesson to relearn, you know, and put those fears at ease.
She would take it, and that is noble. She's 15, and she is saying that she would rather die than risk someone else's life. Even
I debated having that set of panels in there because it's so bad. Yeah, it's just kind of a jarringly dark thing, like, even for how dark this story is, and everything that I'm talking about, like, really getting into it. Like, again, Orihime's getting her teeth knocked out here, but, you know, sexual assault of a minor is always really difficult and bad. If you're not paying attention, you're gonna think Orihime is just kind of standing around being sad, but, like, she's in such peril at all times. And the fact that sexual assault is threatened, or at least acknowledged twice, this has hinky implications. Like, look, there's very... It's clear that Kubo is aware that this is a danger. And I appreciate how delicately he handled it. You know, there's nothing really egregious or sensationalist about this, but, like, if you're keyed into this, it's very apparent that specifically Noichiro Ukuura and Grimjow could do quite bad things to her of that nature.
It doesn't matter that she would do the same for them, without question, happily,
I don't think that's probably a weird compliment to give. But again, I just appreciate how seriously Kubo is handling this.
All she can see is the bloodshed, the destruction reaped, the suffering and corruption sown. Yet again, she is the weakest link, the only person the Arracar could have threatened into obeying, the only one everyone would have to come save. The lives of her friends, the soul of the man she really, genuinely loves, they're all on the line because she was not strong enough to make them stay away. She's happy they came, of course. She's happy that they care. But she's also heartsick that even in the end, she wasn't strong enough to keep them safe, to make them stay away.
What a brutal place to stop her section. And just be like, hey, it's Ichigo time. You want to have fun? Too bad. You're gonna suffer.
He was riding high after the Soul Society arc. Then the Arracar came, kicked down his door, and used him as a...
I love the parallel between that and Junjiao kicking him. It's brutal. Brutal! Speaking of... I don't know, Kubo loves to not reuse, but like, he loves specific body shots. Ichigo getting stabbed around his sword, Ichigo getting holes blasted in his chest, things like that. And it's kind of fun to see where that shows up. And I wonder if it's intentional or if it's just, he likes what he likes.
Hueco Mundo poses against his soul. Much as he's trying to resist, he can feel himself slipping. As his
What a
form
good
him,
page.
The more power he takes, the more he tries to force himself.
That's visceral.
The his hollow
There's pain and anger there.
And sure, that's no different from before, but now Ichigo is having to admit that maybe he didn't know himself half so well as he thought. You can only go through so many life or death battles before you have to admit you
honestly, I think this is like when I was writing this essay, having that click in my brain, like getting the words to be like, oh, this is the tragedy of Ichigo.
You can do more and take more and break someone down to their most
it all clicked together.
Just to see who can leave it all on the floor, who can be better, and you're only 15 and you've got the power of a god and you don't want to stop. Well,
yeah, that's how I felt. Like, I'm so pleased with that section and how that came together and like my delivery of all of it, because like, duh, that's why I care about Ichigo. He's not just like this special wunderkind. We'll get to this page. Like, it's difficult. Like, he's had to suffer to get here, and also, like, it comes at a personal cost in so much as the person he was is slipping away. Like, he's not just a kid anymore, and that's very, very sad. That's when it snaps into focus. That's when it's like, oh, okay, this is the level that I need to approach everyone on. And you can just kind of feel that, like, even when I'm having fun, like, this is a somber thing, because at the heart of it, it's this kid turning himself into a weapon to save people, and there's great, terrible cost to it, and he is increasingly aware of it, and I think he's more aware of it than anyone else, and, he's protecting them from that knowledge. Here, this, I felt like I won the lottery when I remembered this panel, and he's standing so, like, it's so evocative, it's perfectly matched with, Orihime's silhouette, and also, like, I tried very hard to stay away from
ruthlessly names him
story content that happens after the last chapters, but that one, like, it's so perfect, it's the full body shot. He's not swinging around. He's just a very static being. But
But
it's like, I'm here to hurt you. I'm here to make you sad because you know this is when he's saying goodbye to Rukia. And he just looks different from how he normally dresses, you know? Like, he's in sweatpants, a sweatshirt, and flip-flops.
And he has a taste.
You know? Ichigo's looking rough because he threw everything away to save everybody.
What happens now, because now he has to fight for his life, for Orihime's life, for his friends' lives. He's the strongest among them, after all. And even if they fail, he will be there, has to be there, to protect them. And that's becoming a harder and harder feat to accomplish. The Espada are not the people he battled back in the Soul Society that have clear codes of honor and dictate the rules of engagement. They are monsters. Oh, are they monsters?
Kicking a baby, no good.
Is a threat Ichigo understands
I had to limit myself how many times I use that image, because it's rough. It's rough. If you don't know...
or fourth hand.
Gosh, I love that terrible joke. Ghastly. Fantastic. If you don't know... I mean, even if you do know that she's actually an adult, it doesn't matter. This, 7-foot man's kicking a baby. It's brutal. I can't believe Kubo got away with actually drawing that and getting it published.
And all of this suffering they have been through up to this point will be for nothing. If he leaves, he will just have to do it all over again when the villains inevitably come to conquer his home. If he leaves, he will once more be faced with a good woman he was not able to protect.
It feels so dirty trying. I feel like I'm doing the audience dirty by drawing the connection between Orihime and Masaki. They're very prevalent, but that one was just to make you go, ow. Obviously, the same can be said for Rukia, and anyone that he wants to save. But after talking so much about Masaki, it's like, hey, I need you to know, this is pain, this is suffering.
To this battle, as well as the dark horse of the group. He's fairly closed off and a bit prickly. It's because of his terrible father.
I am shocked how many people came to Ryuken's defense, because I clearly don't like him. But the number of people who were like, oh, but he had a hard life, and it's okay that he's emotionally distant and condescending and abusive to his son. You'll never get me on board. Nah, screw this guy. I love this transition.
Despite their proximity,
When I pieced together how to make that work, I was so pleased.
It's difficult to notice at first, considering they tend to have similar goals and end up in similar places, but these are conclusions that both come to separately without ever really interacting with each other.
One thing that breaks my heart, specifically about the 1,000-Year Blood War, is that the parallels between Ishida and Ichigo just kind of stop. They're there if you look for them, certainly. Specifically with, their mothers being called by Yuha. But, there's a lot of... There's so much happening in the earlier chapters, like with the one that I just pointed out. They're constantly... Their stories are in dialogue with each other. And that just kind of disappears. And I think that's a shame. Specifically with how important Ishida is, and the things he does. But that's a story for another time.
Which the Shinigami, defined by organization, control, and militarism as they are,
gosh, I hate how sterile the language is here. The Soul Reapers wiped out the Quincy's. That was a genocide. They murdered all of them.
he is the last
Yeah, I have thoughts about them being real, them tiptoeing around that, especially since, like, it makes Ishida seem more irrational. To be like, oh, why does he hate Shinigami so much? It's like, get out of here.
Caused by his terrible father. And while this baggage does initially put him at odds with Ichigo, they eventually reconcile their differences and become friends. Even so, Ishida is never quite able to get rid of the personal competition he has with Ichigo. Constantly seems to be measuring himself up against our magical best boy, pushing himself harder and harder and harder to be the best because of his terrible father. I hate Ryuken so much. Oh my god.
Yeah, screw this guy. Yeah, I think Ryuken's a really interesting character. Honestly, I'm surprised that the people defending Ryuken didn't get in my grill about Isshin. Isshin's also a bad dad. I love Isshin. I feel very, very many tender feelings towards Isshin.
However, distantly,
he's a bad father and has done crimes against Ichigo and should be called to account for them.
Ishida also learns to step outside of his family legacy and do things for himself.
Fun fact. Oh, yeah, okay, so you can see it here. Obviously this is the image that I pulled for Ichigo's solo picture. And as you can see at the bottom, his foot's cut off. It is shocking how many feet I had to redraw for this video. I also had to do Okuyora's, which we'll get to in a moment. It's very, very stressful because the way I draw feet and the way Kubo draws feet are different. Like, I go for a slightly more cartoony style, and his are very sleek and slim. He loves coming to a pointed toe. And so, like, the fun game I would play, like, okay, alright everybody, look at this picture. What did I change? You know, like, what did I change? Like, what's different? What did I edit? What did I draw in? It's like, okay, pass that test, great. It's not super obvious that I'm adding these things in. But, you know, I just needed it to not be glaringly apparent, you know. I didn't want it to look like I drew it with a mouse in MS Paint.
His sole obligation is to help save Orihime, and while that's true of everyone that ventures into Hueco Mundo, it feels a little bit more pointed coming from him. His self-proclaimed purpose is to uphold the legacy of a slaughtered dynasty, but instead, here he is, prioritizing his friends' personal honor.
Again, I don't know how many people actually read all of these pages, but they're very carefully considered. And I just love that one. I really love that moment of tenderness from Renji, which is weird to say, given the context. But, it's interesting and nice getting that moment of approval in comparison to the Arracar, who are at each other's throats. And like just having these two unlikely allies, like, yeah, they'll give each other guff, but it's like, hey, I see you and respect you. You know, instead of stay out of my way or I'll kill the trash.
If ever remarked upon. Also, and I say this in no way to cheapen the importance of Ishida's gesture or growth. I knew that he had a crush on Orihime.
I knew that talking about this headcanon would get me some grief, but I'm surprised. Like, this more than almost anything got more feedback and be like, I don't actually think he has a crush on her, which is funny because I can tell people think that I'm an Ishihime shipper, and I'm not. I don't feel strongly about it either way. I think it's just a platonic thing. I think it's a platonic relationship they have, but I think he has a crush on her, as I explained here. It just feels very tender and sweet. Just because, like, Kubo certainly plays with the idea. He goofs on him a few too many times for me to think it's nothing. But yeah, I was really surprised to have so many people be like, actually, that's not the thing. It's like no disrespect to them. Like, it's perfectly fine. This is all just supposition. You know, we can feel however we feel about it. But I'm just kind of surprised. Like, out of everything, it's that got comments. You know, And yet not, because it's shipping. People get heated about it. Honestly, astonished I dodged Ichihime Ichiruki discourse. Especially since, like, so much of this back section is about Orihime's relationship to Ichigo and his relationship to her. Yeah, I'm glad that has hopefully died down. Don't kill each other over shipping. It's dumb. If people want to make fictional characters kiss, let them kiss.
And he knows it's a bad idea.
But yeah, between the Ryukin stuff and
they really aren't strong enough to keep
Ishida having a crush,
keep safe, and they will only
you know, Ishida. This section got the most comments probably.
He complies. It's a bad idea.
But yeah, I just wanted to mention it in this essay because it contributes to the danger and the sorrow for me. And be like, these are the stakes. This is so important to them.
Think about this page, this panel.
And yet they do it anyway, you know?
Once more, he's 15.
And you know, even if it wasn't romantic, you know, if it's just friendship, like, that's the level they're on, like, he would do it for probably anyone. Like, if it was Chad being like, I gotta go save my best friend, Ishida would probably do it, you know? Because he loves someone, you know, 6 hearts beating as one, like, that is the intimacy of their friendship. And they asked. Yeah. It's fascinating how their greatest strength is what's putting them in the most terrible danger.
Want to do. He is largely disinterested in the people and things around him, and views practically everything with contempt for their arrogance, their lack of control, their foolishness, their heart. And in comes this kid who is all of that, loud and obnoxious and hilariously, obviously outclassed, who insists on getting in Ulquiorra's way regardless. Because, and this is so fascinating.
There's the feed I redrew.
Ulquiorra,
I was so stressed about getting a perspective of those right.
That's Aizen. He's the one that's been ruining everyone's lives for the last 300 chapters, and I hate him, and it gives me joy knowing I'm not talking about him.
Aizen sucks. If you had any doubt, I think he sucks.
He's not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest, not the oldest, not the most bloodthirsty. He's not even the guy that wants to fight Ichigo the most. Really, the only thing Ulquiorra can claim is that
the drama. I love it. I can feel his hand cutting through the air. That's so good. There's something quite delightful about Ulquiorra getting some of the most dynamic poses in his chapters. And yet, like, he's still quite he's quite rigid. You know, you don't see him moving, you just see him at the end point. It makes him so unapproachable, so robotic. I love it.
And when faced with a brash, kind, compassionate, self-empowered person like Ichigo, yeah, you could call them diametrically opposed. For all his cool control, Ulquiorra becomes increasingly unraveled.
What a little brat. He acts like he's so calm and rational. It's like, sir, you pop off all the time.
Each Espada embodies one core aspect of death, of immortality, of vice. And while, yes, these are mostly just the 7 deadly sins with a few extra to round us out to 10, Ulquiorra's core concept is...
I love that pink behind him.
He cannot believe what he does not see, and he cannot respect the unbelievable. Genuinely, I love Ulquiorra. I really do. He's such a nasty little...
I worked so hard to, like, bury the lead about how much I loved Ulquiorra. I was like, hey, be normal about him. You've got... What? How much? 50 minutes. I got 50 minutes into this essay. It's like, be cool, be chill, don't be weird about Ulquiorra. Everyone's gonna judge you if you are, you know. I don't know if this is actually the case. I don't know if Ulquiorra fangirls have a reputation. But, like, he kind of says something that I choose him over everyone else, right?
because he knows that if they try to call him,
But, yeah, it was fun to, like, to give him his flowers, and just be like, hey, you suck, you're great at your job, I spent way too much time thinking about you. Also, speaking of shipping, boy, I shipped these two bad when I was young. And like, I felt in earlier drafts of the script, it was almost like I was apologizing for it, because I was like, hey guys, I know it's bad, it's not good, you know, there's an age gap, and he kidnapped her, and he's actively trying to break her, and it's messy and bad. But you know, like, that's not the point of this essay. I'm not here to apologize for what Teenage Me did. But I think that interestingly it did kind of weaken the essay, because I was so cautious about, like, not. Yeah, okay, we need to acknowledge that. I was so conscious of not making this a ship video, you know, and not muddying the waters with all of that, and that I don't go into their relationship very much, which is a shame, because, you know, setting any supposed romantic ideas aside, I think it's fascinating how Okuyora's entire mission is to, like, crush the life out of Orihime, and it just doesn't work, and it makes him angry, and he keeps trying to assert his dominance in, like, really subtle, fascinating, and abusive ways. Like, I love the part where Okuyora rocks up after Grimmjow has Orihime save Ichigo, and he's like, "What are you doing, Grimmjow?" And then he looks at Orihime, like, I mean, it's a look that carries so much. It's like assessing her view. It's assessing, like, how complicit is she? Is she going to support him in this? And she drops her eyes because she's afraid of him or because she's embarrassed. And it says so much. So much. Such an upsetting moment. Like, Kubo never says it out loud. Like, he talks about, like, oh, Orihime's in a psychological cage, but it's framed as, like, she's submissive to all of the Espada, which is just not the case. But, like, the abusive nature of the relationship is very clear. And she already is taking on patterns of behavior that, you know, like, she's doing what she needs to keep safe, which means appease him. And you know, but the fact that, like, she's able to see him in this ghastly form later on the dome and, like, speak to him and engage with him in this really compassionate way is truly beautiful. And, like, that's the thing that I love so much. And, like, them coming to this sense of understanding that, like, Ichigo cannot fathom, even though, like, he was Okuyora's parallel, you know, like, he was the monster. I think that's really interesting, and it is a slight weakness of the essay, but, you know, overall, I think it works acceptably well. If I were to do a remaster of this, I would go into it more, but here we are. Anyways, let's go back and talk about, again, Okuyora could do bad things to Orihime. Yeah, and that shot, I think, is very, very carefully calculated on Kubo's part. Because he didn't have to touch her, you know? Like, he didn't have to for the threat to be there. He could have just raised his hand. But, you know, he did, and he touched her in the spot where he touches all of his wording. You know, he, like, that's struggling to not make this sound even worse than it is. But that's the spot, right? Like, that's where he kills people. That's where his hollow heart is, you know, that's where he killed Ichigo twice. And I think it's also very intentional in drawing the parallel with Neutra, because we're fresh off the heels of that as well. Like, you know, it's interesting. It's interesting. Kubo's doing a lot of really subtle stuff with Ukiura to make him very scary, and I find that fascinating.
I'd cry. Ichigo is no stranger to facing supremely powerful enemies.
Gosh, I feel like I use this picture too much, but also it's so perfect. Like, this is a kid with a dozen swords pointed at his head, and he's still taking you on. It's so good.
Almost as though he's convincing himself. If I can just beat you, I can take Orihime and go home. And that's when we get the big reveal. No, he's not the strongest. He's not the leader. He's just some
gobsmack moment
in the lineup, and yet he knows that Ichigo is not as strong as him.
I just love the narrative arc, or not the narrative arc, but like the progression for Ukiura, like the tension and the build up to him. So good.
Been patched up, sprinted over here, and
like there's so much dread and anticipation in how he's the focal point for all of it. He's the one for all of the bad moments. Like Grimmjow, sure, but psychologically, it's always Ukiura, and I love that.
Or his techniques, or anything that can give him an upper edge.
Yeah. Yeah, I realized that whole, like, it's raining thing in the edit. That's why it's just text taking up the screen. But it's so important to be like, you gotta understand, look, he's tapping into Ichigo's sad, he's tapping into the sads. It still surprises me how much I realize in the edit, like, it takes so long to make these scripts, you know, because like I'm outlining, and then I'm re-outlining, and then I'm re-outlining, and then I'm drafting, and then I'm editing, and then, you know, I'm looking through the source material, and you know, like the ideas, like it's different getting the words and then the pictures put before my eyes, and so even though I honestly don't really enjoy the video editing as much, it doesn't delight me the way the recording and the writing does. The product is so gratifying because, you know, I'm having these realizations in the moment. Ugh. I love that horrible angelic imagery. So pleased with how that happened.
This is Ukiura tearing through the place with Ichigo as his wrecking ball. The battle is more akin to a massacre, Ichigo being battered again and again.
That's me cutting together two different times of Ichigo standing up to make it look sequential, but I'm really pleased with how that came together. It looks great.
As he releases forms first once, then in an unmatched display of power, twice. And when Ishida and Orihime catch up to them and reach the top of the dome of Las Noches, they see the worst.
No matter how many times
the dome
I see that page, it's just so brutal. It's so effortless for him to do this, you know. I love this title card. One thing you might have noticed is the slight color coding I have going on. And like Las Noches and the Arracar, they get the cream text. The Lust chapters, when I talk about them, that's always white. Because, you know, I'm reflecting the white of Hueco Mundo, of their uniforms, of all that.
Is that the stakes?
Whereas, like, you know, everyone else gets the pink and the red.
Violence is a standard in this
but
genre. It's
you know, it feels especially necessary for Ukiura. You know, his pale skin.
There is no secret weakness to exploit. The power of friendship isn't going to slap.
I love how many
your
times
face
I just,
when
like, chuck the
everything
books.
succeeds.
That's such an effective, like,
They will
period.
have to deal with what they've done, if they even make it to that point. Everything is earned in this story. Every development and new skill stems from blood and sweat and tears. And granted, this gets a little wibbly towards the end of the series, but here, it's in full effect. Unlike a lot of battle manga, it's not just them kicking around
I
until the
wish
narrative
there was
decides
more
someone gets the makeover
video,
and a new set of
regular
powers.
or commonly
They have to
available
suffer. They
of
have to
Kubo
work
having
to cut
interviews
away their
or
own weakness
drawing or
to
whatnot.
grow that much more.
I would have really
Usually
enjoyed that
it's
B-roll,
euphoric.
but also it's just
Sometimes
fascinating watching him
it's
just
devastating.
freehand sketch
Although
with a
Ichigo
Sharpie.
gives it more than his
The man's
best,
so talented.
he loses.
Like, I'm just in awe of
defeated
his
before,
art. It's
very
so,
badly
so beautiful.
sometimes,
Like,
very
the dichotomy between, like, these sleek, effortless, organic lines and then, boof,
dies, and
a little
everyone
bit of grit in there.
not mostly, completely. We are forced, like Orihime, to
Man,
stare
when I
our
first read this
friend
as a
and
kid,
champion
I was
and see that
obsessed.
there's
I just kept coming back and reading these chapters over and over. And I was young too. I was like 13 or 14. Just trying to process everything.
He's the main character. He's the hero. This can't happen to him. But Kubo is once more taking us by the face, making us stare at the corpse
I
of Ichigo
love this
again
callback, like
and
taking us
again
by the
and
face.
again. Because to progress,
You know, this is whack. You know, this
fail.
turning that sort of flippant phrasing into something quite terrible.
We just have to do our best to deal with it. Now Ishida and Orihime are left with the body of their friend, the strongest of
The
them
sense of
all,
movement
and
in
the
these
helpless
chapters
that
is
kills him.
phenomenal.
They have no hope. That's laughably
Like,
obvious,
even,
but
you know,
still,
even when,
Ishida
like,
tries
the
to
shot there of
fight.
Okuyoto standing
He's
still,
completely outmatched,
like, you can just
obviously,
feel the smoke and the
obviously,
dust
but he
billowing
must
around
fight to
him.
avenge his friend. And
Like,
if nothing else,
even when people are
sacrificing
standing still, like,
himself
so
or
much is
he makes a
happening
mistake isn't
around
worth it.
them or in their
Chivalrous
heads.
to the last, our Ishida. Only Orihime can't escape. Not only is she unable to
It
lay
honestly
down
became a little
the
bit
dome
difficult
focus on
talking
her
about
own,
this bit,
she is
or not
taking
talking about it, but
shock
like
and
editing video
death.
together. 'Cause it's like,
She's
I only have so many pages,
trying to
right?
heal him.
It's like, sure, you
Trying
know,
to
I have
bring
several
him back, but
chapters
she
and
has
you know, they
so
have,
many times now. She just
what,
can't
16 to
let
like
go. This
22
is her
pages
job.
each,
She is
but,
the healer. She is the support character. If she
you know,
cannot fight, she
it's a
will keep
lot of
people
words that I'm
safe,
saying.
But she can't. Her powers aren't working. Because in a world where she cannot heal actively hostile energy, Okuyura's is a malignant ocean.
All that said,
of the
I
sky.
love this
In
section,
an act of
specifically my
devastating
narration.
desperation, she asks for help.
I think it's really well paced.
10-year-old girl begs her friend in
Especially since, like, I'm just doing this by myself. You know, I don't have anyone to direct me. I don't have anyone to say, okay, you know, let's try this one, but, like, devastated. Let's try this one, but, you know, calm. That's just me being like, all right, you know, one more time with feeling.
It's much, much worse.
But, like, this one, it came out exactly as I was hoping. I just, I love listening to it.
This is the pound of
just
flesh, but it's not
perfect.
actually flesh that is lost.
I have no notes, you know, it's exactly like I wanted.
Nonsensical concept. The heart. The jugulators.
This bit. Okay. So, honestly, I probably should have let that breathe a little bit more. Yeah, you know, I should have let it sit on Ichigo a little bit longer to be like, oh, we've processed a lot. But I love the whiplash of the jugulators. Everything about this section. As I say in the essay, it was such a late stage addition. And it wasn't because I was like, oh, I'm surprised. I didn't know Grimjow factored into this. But it's because, like, when I first wrote this, it was so tightly focused on, like, the specific events of the dome. And, like, I didn't go into explaining any of the characters. I didn't go into any of the themes. It was just like, hey, this is here. 2-second explanation of why it's important. And so because of that, the scope of the essay slowly expanded out and then out and then out, and I was so furious realizing I had to, because like I was in video editing, because I go very, very sequentially. Like I write it, and then once it's completely written, with very, very few exceptions, I then record all of it, I edit the recording, I then get into the video editing. It's like, once we're at video editing, not much is changing just because of how I work. Like if I am editing the video and I think, that's not quite right, what I've said is wrong, then that is a failure on my script writing process. Because like it needs to be as airtight and bulletproof as it can when it goes into the recording. And then even the recording, like I'm like, that is the last safety net of like, okay, I'm saying this out loud. Is this the best way to say it? Do we need to adjust anything? Do we need to qualify anything? Do we need to clarify anything? So I was devastated to realize, like, crap, I've got to write an entire page about Grimjow now, because I need to give context. I need to give explanation for why the lust chapters are so sad. Because, you know, like I said, it's a tragedy. It's a failure. It's like, we know what victory looks like. And so, all that said, I'm really pleased with how the Jugulators section turned out. I love this one. This is probably like, this is vying for second place for my favorite title card. It's horrible. It's oppressive. Like, I think, get out of here. I don't want that. Okay.
The Jugular.
It's horrible. It's so intense and terrifying. Like, to have this just mass of red consuming the entire screen. And it's so big that it doesn't make sense. You know, like, I have trouble processing this as a word. And it's just lines. But I'm so pleased to have the in the middle. Like, it's such a crazy choice. It's so off the wall, but it also, like, is anchoring your attention and being like, okay, you know, these are words now. These are characters. I just love it. I love it. And, you know, it's red for blood for Grimjow, my little baby boy. Yeah, I think it's great. I just love it. It's phenomenal.
Part of what makes this fight hit so hard is that...
Yeah, I'm a bit too apologetic. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry for dragging you away from it. But also I was really worried that people would be like, hey, what's this dumb crap here?
He already had victory in his grasp.
You know, like, why we were all primed for the bads. Show us Hollow Ichigo.
The culmination of Ichigo's arc in Hueco Mundo. And that's for good reason. Ichigo's fight with Grimjow, all hell the gang.
Yeah, what up?
Great fight.
Gang, Grimjow gang.
And I'm not just referencing this color spread that told me so, and also makes me sad for reasons that'll be apparent later. And it's just important. There are amazing action shots, emotional stakes.
This music here, it's returned to a sound that you've already heard. You know, this was in the beginning.
Is the perfect example of a battle manga content.
And I wanted to use the slower song earlier that I was waxing poetic about, but I tested it with my sister, and she was like, "No, you cannot. This sounds sexy," which I didn't have any. Like, I didn't have that concept at all, because I'm associating it with Masaki dying, and I'm like, that's really sad. And and she's like, you cannot do this, and I was like, oh gosh, yeah. You know, we don't need to accidentally give Grimichi messaging here.
That's really it. We shake
you
the dust
know,
off our shoulders,
and I just think that's funny. By a queer quirk of fate, I almost ended up in that zone of being like, hey, more ships. Why do you think I paired Ishida with Orihime?
The excitement of the moment.
You know, when that's just not the case.
Ichigo is slipping. Hollow Ichigo told him that he had a killer instinct, but it's only in this fight that he fully acknowledges, but also accepts it. Only when he is pushed to the brink, only when Grimmjow is gleefully using every dirty trick in the book, does Ichigo stop holding back. He gives into his bloodlust, he embraces his own thrill of the battle. Up to this point, all of the battles of import for Ichigo have him confront someone who views the world in fundamentally different ways, and usually it ends with Ichigo triumphing over them and proving that his way is correct. But here, that's not really the case. Grimmjow, as violent and abhorrent as he is, makes sense to Ichigo. You're not the only one who wants to win. You want to kill me because of how I look at you? I know how you feel.
Oh, I had to record that part so many times because I was like, oh gosh. Like I knew that I knew I wanted to say it like Ichigo. But I was so nervous that I was just sounding dumb. I was like, oh, I'm a boy. And you know, like I started getting self-conscious of like, oh, it's too much growl, you know. But I think it's serviceable. I think it worked.
She sees something perilously like the villains keeping her in a cage. Worse yet, Ichigo can feel the fear coming from her. Every time he checks in with Orihime, every time he rests his attention over
so before I made this essay, I didn't really interact with the Bleach community much, like not for years and years. So like I'm very curious how many people actually view this section, or actually consider it to be as sad as I do. Because like this part is fun. It's great. Like this is a romp, right? Like this fight is adrenaline central, but it's so sad. And so clearly, even as a kid, like I felt this like sense of darkness and loss, because you know that's what Kubo wants. But you know, I just haven't had a chance to talk to many people about it, and so I wonder.
For blood. But then the battle ends, and we can set that aside. We're safe now. We can have some jokes. The narrative easing back the pressure that it's been putting on our throats. Although there is that sense of loss, you can write it off as the loss of innocence found in the hero's
beautiful
journey.
humanity of that page.
Ichigo has learned something about himself, but
and
now
just
that he's
how sad Ichigo
it's okay
looks.
Because this is an action adventure story. It's okay.
It's shocking. Like Ichigo has this, like his look is the furrowed brow, right? But it's shocking how often Kubo draws Ichigo to just look sad. And like I can read into that as I want.
The reason I ultimately decided
but it just feels telling that Orihime's looking at him with this deeply melancholic, sort of apologetic smile after everything, like after having her whole like, ooh, he's a monster moment. And she's like, he's my Ichigo.
From specific scenes to comments made by the antagonists,
it's just sad.
Ichigo treats a fallen
Get
enemy,
these kids help.
They are informed by each other. But rather than be a progression or an escalation of what Ichigo has done with Grimmjow, it's this alarming...
I like that. I mean, there are so many simple tricks that I pull, but, you know, I love the little... It's confetti, you know? Swapping the colors, reflecting the dialogue, putting mirror images of things.
Meet me outside, how about that? It's a cold statement of fact. Even the art begins to shift, reflecting this bleaker, more terrifying tone. Ulquiorra, although smaller in stature than Ichigo, is given more visual importance, power, and grandeur on the page. He perpetually stands
Consider, like, I think about how small Ulquiorra is all the time. Like, a lot of the male characters in Bleach are quite big, you know, especially considering, like, they're Japanese and they're all, like, 6'2", or at least, like, the combatants. Like, Kubo loves a big, beefy man.
But it's telling that a mere
And Ulquiorra, especially like as he progresses, you know, like as he becomes prettier, he definitely becomes more delicate. He's only like 5'6", you know, and he's got a fairly small frame.
He is made demonic and grotesque, tapping into the primal fear of the audience.
And it's just so impressive that like he is as intimidating as Grimjow when, you know, he's stunting and kicking and flipping and doing all of that. Like, I just really, like I said in the essay, I like that dichotomy of Grimjow creates this fear for your physical self, but Ulquiorra is making this deeper fear. Like, you fear for like the core of yourself around Ulquiorra. And it's worse for the audience as well, because they're privy to his psychological manipulations, whereas Ichigo really isn't. Like, there's some things, but he's really not getting the full brunt of the Ulquiorra experience.
Of the Lust chapters, the absolute nadir of the entire story. It is ugly and monstrous and cruel. Here we are forced to reckon with the dark side of power, the dark side of Ichigo's soul. We have seen hints before.
I love this music. It made me really nervous. Because like I found it and I was like, okay, this is alright, you know, I had my selection of like eerie tracks. And I like this one a lot, but it gets like quite dissonant and it's quite alarming. And I was really, really worried that it would be too off-putting. So there's a lot of messing around, so it's like, hey, I've adequately made you uncomfortable and upset to look at this wee small child holding the limb of his combatant as blood and fire rain down from the sky, but, you know, not turn you off from it completely.
More impossibly savage than what we saw before. Ulquiorra was vicious, trying to break Ichigo and make him say he surrendered, to prove that he was right. But here, Ichigo has no rationale. He has no sense of self. He's not doing this to any purpose, isn't trying to prove any point. He is just pure destruction. And what's worse,
I think the thing that like kills me is like once Ulquiorra knows he's beaten, like he just gives up. It feels so counter to everything in Bleach. You know, like the fact that he just says, my life has no meaning now that I've lost to you. Like, he doesn't even try for redemption. Like, he just knows. He's like, alright, I'm done. Why waste energy on a futile attempt, you know? Embrace the void.
Tries to appeal to him and reclaim him from the savagery. Ichigo turns
Gosh, the perspective.
This is the nightmare version of
oh, the things I would sacrifice to have as good a mastery of perspective as Kubo does.
His balance is gone. His control is gone. It's just violence and aggression, that pervasive taste for blood. And it's made all the worse because here
I'm not really talking about what I'm saying in this part of the essay much, because think it's phenomenal. Not to brag. But like,
there isn't an explanation for
I think it stands completely on its own. Like there's nothing I would really change. There's nothing I would add. There's no extra context.
But
just
we're never told outright why.
Oh, never mind. Hold on. We found our thing. But we'll get to it. So much of this essay is about like distilling information and presenting it as efficiently as possible and making like this really tight package, which I'm really pleased with how it turned out. But like this section, like I I fully believe that, like, you could just show someone this and they're like, yeah, that's it. You know, like, if that is all anyone watches of the essay, they will have a concept of why it's bad. The rest of it, that's context. That just makes it worse. But, you know, like, you're looking at some real big crimes here. Yeah. I'm running out of things to say just because, like, I think it's great. I'm so pleased. It took a lot of revisions, and, like, going back over the chapters and just staring at all of the limbs that get cut off. Oh no. You know, feeling my feels and then just like, okay, like, let's put this on the page and actually make it sensical. But this part, we're never actually told why it ever happens. Got a lot of comments about this one as well. So I feel more or less people who've watched the other video know, because, you know, whether they've read comments or I responded back to them. But this part caught a lot of heat because people are like, well, actually, you know, Shirasaki told him this. It's like, yes, that is true. And I just forgot. I forgot part of it. And I remembered what he said earlier. I think it was like a couple pages before, during the King and his horse fight, where he says, you know, it's like, hey, if you lose control, I'll kill you. And then he kind of inverts it and says, I'll take control. Like, if you die, I'll take control. So, you know, I should have gone back and checked that bit. You know, not much to say about that either way. It's like, yeah, the answer was there. Should have taken it. At the same time, this is also, like, there's layers to my statement, in so much as, like, we're never told why Ichigo turns into this creature specifically, because it is so drastically different. It's all his other forms were progressions into the sort of lizard form, like with the stripes on his mask and the claws and whatnot. It's like, I don't know if there's a super deep reason for it. It just kind of feels like Kubo wanted to draw a different cool monster, and I think this form of Ichigo is far more effective and affecting than if we just got, like, the lizard creature that he turns into back when he's he's gaining control of his inner hollow. Yes, later stuff gets patched in about, like, yeah, White and in the Everything But the Rain section, and how it's like, oh, he's manifesting like the hollow that attacked Misaki. I think that's a retcon. I think, like, that whole chunk certainly came much after, like, Kubo decided on it much after this section. I don't have proof, it's just an opinion. And so, like, that's I guess it's a long way of me saying, like, I was given a reason and I didn't like it, so I'm pretending it doesn't exist. Which, sure, fine, I'm capricious. But, I don't know, it just doesn't feel adequately answered for me. It's like, why did he turn into those forms before? Why does he turn into this one now? And, you know, the explanation, like, the so-called explanation of, like, oh, he just didn't evolve enough, it's garbage for me. That's no good. That's not good enough. That's just 'cause by another name. Which, I say all that to say, like, I think it's fine, honestly. Would I like more? Yes, I would like the concrete answer. But, like, when viewing the story like, especially this part in isolation, I think that lack of answers is fine. Especially like, given the bleak tone of it. If you're just looking at this as a horror tragedy, it totally works. Like, the more you explain horror, or certain kinds of horror, monster horror specifically, the less scary it becomes. And, just this terrible, messed up thing happening that's perverting all of the good things that we've had before, I think it's great. I think that's a really solid narrative choice. Very affecting. If anything, I would have liked the fallout to be actually dealt with instead of sidestepped to deal with other problems. Because, we never come... see, the more definitive statements I make, the more people are going to come for me. Yeah, it's kind of acknowledged when Ichigo's training to become Mugetsu. But, like, we don't actually deal with how he feels about it. Is really what I'm getting at. And, like, how Orihime feels with watching Ichigo die, and how Ishida feels with Ichigo turning on him. That's never addressed. There are kind of nods to, like, yeah, we worked through it, but, yeah, so I just would have liked a specific follow-through.
We were never given the reward of explaining what happened next, though that is a discussion for another time. But at the same time, I don't
Ooh, also, a fun thing. Similar to how I played coy with hiding Ukuyota's second form, I worked very, very, very hard to hold off on showing this, this Vestalore form. Because, I'm teasing the people who know, whether you've read it or watched the anime, it's like, what's coming. I mean, it's the thumbnail, so, like, no surprise, but, like, I very much wanted that to be the dark presence lurking, which is why you see a different version of this color spread earlier in the essay, I believe, where you don't see the Vestalore form, and it's just Visard Ichigo that you see.
Call it plot armor, call it me being a little too dazzled by something I love. But
I like that I like that progression. I think it's a big pity that we don't grow from the Vestalore form from this point. Like, we just kind of reset. We just reset with the Fullbring, and go off that direction. Which is, it's fine. It's fine, but, I pull for the demon imagery, I pull for the dark imagery really hard, this is very obvious. So yeah, I just think it's, I wanted it to be a good, fun reveal. Especially how terrible it is. Oh, see, here it is. This is me being like, oh snap. This is, oops. Oops, this is Kubo actually telling me a thing that I confidently said he didn't. And I was hoping this sort of hanging a lantern on it would keep me from getting called out, and it didn't. Which, fair. Super fair. I should have re-recorded, that's on me.
A long-distance attack around his sword to amp up his melee damage. I believed it when Okuyota freaking released twice. Are you kidding me? What Bankai BS is this? You don't get to do that. You're a hollow. You're a hollow. You told me you didn't get to do that, but you did it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I tried to keep a tone of, I guess, neutrality. In so much as, like, I don't want this to just be me talking about how great my favorite characters are. Like, I wanted it to be actual analysis and be like, hey, this is what they're doing, this is why it's important, this is why I'm exploring their point of view, and not just being like, I like Okuyota because I think he's neat. But again, that's just also me being insecure and being like, is it okay if I say all this stuff? So, there are two wolves inside me, and it's one loving Okuyota, and one being ashamed of loving Okuyota.
10 days. Is that even worth counting when you're 15 and you have lives on the line? Now the balance has been disrupted, ripping the positive aspects from the fabric of his character. His instinct here is good.
Ugh.
Protect, help his friends,
It's such an
save them
obvious
from
thing to say, but it's so
annihilation. And now
brutal
that he doesn't have
that
those pesky morals
the
or
hole that's
outside
blasted
way,
in his
he can do
chest
that to
becomes
its
his
fullest
hollow
extent.
hole.
But it goes too far.
And, you know, especially
Gone
when you
from
think about,
protection
like,
to needless
the whole
chaos,
being
beating an
his
army
absence
to
of
keep
heart.
home, to mutilating a
Um,
corpse because he can,
You know, like,
and
he doesn't have a
things
heart
to
anymore, and
no
so that's why
way
he's turning on his
coming back.
friends. You know, his heart does not beat with
Now a
theirs.
monster, and he will fight
Tragic.
as a monster. And then, on a fluke,
I think that sound effect is
quirk of
probably
fate,
too
Okunoda
much.
managing to heave his mangled, half-formed body
But I
out to
also
deliver a final
like
blow,
it.
to do just enough to
Um,
crack Ichigo's
I like
face,
it
and
more
it's
than I think it's too
over.
much, which is why it's in the
Ichigo
video
is
still.
returned to his normal state,
Um,
and the
but
worst
I-
5 minutes of everyone's lives is
I think
finally
it's a
done.
bit out of
But
nowhere.
at what cost?
Considering like I don't really use I only use one other
Running
sound
out of
effect.
clock, even the score
And so
to make
it
up for
sounds
what
a
has
bit
just
like
happened.
it
But
just feels a bit like over dramatic and just being like
Some
da na na
harm is
na.
irreparable. Some costs cannot be unpaid. Although Ukiura is on his feet and had the energy to rally, he's not going to survive this fight. Ichigo did permanent damage as a hollow, and while Ukiura wants to see this
I
fight
love
through,
the
wants to
way
finally prove who can
Kubo
win in this
draws
contest of wills,
like
heart
the
and
steam
heartless,
clouds
Visards and
for them
Arracar,
panting.
he can't.
Especially compared to like just
And Ichigo can't.
Okuyora's
Will
dead-eyed
not
gaze. It's
claim
like
this
that's
victory
this man
these
is
days.
in agony.
Somehow, after all we've
like,
seen him say and do,
you
after
can
casually
just
torturing
feel the
one
cost.
tormenting Ichigo,
Like him
mutilating Ichigo,
slowly
after
dying
seeing
before
him
our
rail
eyes,
against the
even
uselessness of life,
even before he
Ukiura's death
bursts
is
into ash.
incredibly sad. As Ichigo states, I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to win like this. Not now. Not this way. Not when Ichigo had to be a monster to do it. Not when Ukiura finally managed a shred of empathy. As the entire world fades to white, Ukiura has the first positive emotion.
I love how
of his entire
subtle
modified existence.
the art is fading out. Like you can already see Orihime getting spotty. As he's just looking around, like so mean. It's so mean to look through his eyes in his dying chapter. Just look from him to her to the sky.
And it is only when his eyes are gone and his vision hazes out and he has to function solely on faith that he gets it. He understands what these children have been fighting for this entire time.
One of my favorite
He
things in
understands
manga
why they
is
remained when faced with impossible
when
odds.
they
This is
become
it,
sequential
a moment
like
of
that.
understanding. The Elijah
Give
gasp
this
at the end of Hamilton,
sensation
the epiphany that
of
clinches his narrative.
being cinematic, of like
But
of
here
being
it
fluid,
does not bring
a video.
reassurance. It doesn't bring victory.
It's so effective. Like it slows things down so effectively, and it gives you time for like real subtlety and nuance. So you get the sense of like,
and to twist the knife even
it's,
further,
you know, his last seconds are taking so long just to raise his hand, but it's still not enough time.
takes pity on this creature and tries to offer him a bit of comfort as he dies. And yet, it doesn't even work. The
fact that like she misses him and keeps reaching. Like, what more do you need? That's Orihime, man. That's her in one page. Kubo's mean. It's just a mean page. Like, and that's really what I talk about. Like, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like, oh, Bleach drops these ideas. It drops these storylines. Like, everything up to this point has led me to believe that like watching Okuyoda die and failing to be able to comfort him would be a major character moment for Orihime, and it's going to really matter for her. But Orihime never thinks of Okuyoda again. Like, Ichigo is the only one to acknowledge him, and that's as like a super major like, hey, my life and my power has changed because of him. And I think that's a pity. I think it's a real pity. It's like, sure, she was only gone for a couple of days, but she was still tortured. She was put through the ringer, and we don't see any effect of that on her character, and we don't get any sense that it informs her going forward. You know, I think it's a pity.
Or at least, it is for mine. You're allowed your own thoughts, of course, but this is my pitch as to why I
getting these volumes, I think 40 and 41, the last stage. That was one of the last things that happened in preparation for this video essay. Like, I've been wanting these for years, and I just never got around to getting them. And it just felt like a perfect little end cap of like, yes, I don't have to think about this essay anymore. I don't have to think about this thing, like obsess over it as intensely as I do. It's like, it's all right, you know, like, it's in my collection. We can move on. All right, Ginjo, your slutty little hip peek. What's with that? But yeah, it is. It's just a funny little culmination of my experience with this, because, you know, I felt like, to some extent, like everything that I've been talking about, like I felt this so deeply for years, like since I first read it, which wasn't long after it released. Like I caught up to the scanlations middle of the 1,000-Year Blood War. Nope, that's not what it's called. Middle of Fate Karakura. And so, you know, I think it was actually right after. And so, like, I've just been sitting on this for so long. And so it was nice to just be able to be like, all right, it's in your collection. You've made your video essay. You're done. I'm not done. I mean, like, I still have plans to talk about Bleach and whatnot, but you know, the Lust chapters essay isn't hanging over my head anymore.
Too good in these chapters, flaws and all, that it peaked in a way that it can never truly cash out on.
In a previous draft of this essay, I talked about how, like, it briefly became a seinen, and it's like, when you just become a sad, dark, psychological drama horror, that's not really gonna work for the Big Dumb Sword manga. But, you know, that's a very intense level of supposition that I just didn't really want to get into, and it just kind of felt high and mighty, and be like, ooh, it was too good, and they killed it.
I've loved Bleach for the last,
so, you know,
15 years
it got revised to this.
And sometimes I forget about it.
Far more positive conclusion, I think. Just being like, hey, it is what it is.
Thinking, maybe it's not carved upon my bones. That was just a childhood thing. But I always come back to it because I love Bleach.
I love Bleach.
I love it for all these reasons and more, and I love the Lust chapters best of all. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you. Thank you, Taikubo, for these halcyon days.
Boy, I need to change that. I need to make it so my shilling doesn't completely cover up this very emotional moment. That's funny. Yeah, I'm so pleased with how this essay ended. You know, like, calling it Goodbye Halcyon Days, obviously, putting a positive twist on that whole farewell from Orihime, and, like, just you know, like, this is a tribute to Bleach and how much I love it, and just everything it's meant to me, and it's impacted. Like, it's such a formative influence. It doesn't feel like enough to say it's a formative influence. You know, like, obviously some people accurately called out, like, you know, the title cards, that's informed by how Kubo does his title pages and how he plays with form there. You know, some of my, you know, like my approach to character and world building and the way I engage with things is because I had these very early experiences and you know, as a kid was having to ask these very difficult questions, and like figure out, like, why am I sad when the scary monster dies? You know, like, why does it mean something when Ichigo catches Grimmjow and gently lowers him to the ground? Why do I love big, sad, buff dudes? Yeah, and so it was really important, like, especially after being like, hey, like, I inherently have to criticize the next couple of arcs. Like, one, because, like, my argument is the story peaks here. It's the best it ever is halfway through. The other parts fall off. Which I think does lead to me sort of over-exaggerating how I feel about the Fullbring and Thousand Year Blood War arcs, especially since, like, I hadn't revisited them in any sort of recent timeline when I wrote that. I'm like, yeah, it's bad. But I realize now, having reread them, it's like, I still don't think they're as good. I still stand by my argument, like, yeah, Bleach peaked here, but it's very clear to me how much of my distaste is flavored by, or at least then, is flavored by, it's not the Lust chapters, and that's why I don't like it. And I spent literally the rest of Bleach wanting to go back to that darkness, and like just engage with it on that level, and it didn't, which is fine. It sounds passive aggressive when I say it like that, but it's like, look, it was bitter in the moment, but like now I realize that's part of the appeal of the Lust chapters, of like, it's a once in a lifetime occurrence. Like, I got, you know, 50 to 100 excellent chapters building up to this purity of purpose to give me the Lust chapters. And, you know, I'm immensely thankful, you know. Sure, I would like more. I'm a little sad there's not more, but I'm delighted for what I have. And I just really like being able to share that with people. So, you know, I shudder to think how much longer this commentary edition is compared to the actual video. I have a lot to say. But thank you for coming along with me on this little, I don't know, deep dive retrospective. I don't want to say commentary again. This little perusal of the video and hearing what I have to say about it and some of my thoughts. I hope they're coherent. I'm gonna cut the dumber things and pray that I have conclusions to half the things I say. Because I just got distracted and I was like, oop, let's talk about this thing next. So anyways, thank you for listening and or watching. I am working on a follow-up video to this one, as I said before. Who knows when that'll come out? Que sera, sera. I'm just really, really proud of this video essay. As evidenced by me saying, like, I just love it. I think I did great. But you know, this is one of the best things on my channel so far, and I look forward to topping it. It's gonna be a fun journey. I hope you stick around. Have a good night.